Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to Chapter 4. We're talking about cells. We just finished up talking about prokaryotes. There are two different kinds of cells on the planet, two different kinds of living things, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. We just finished talking about prokaryotes. Prokaryote means before the nucleus. The only organisms on the planet that are prokaryotes are bacteria and these other things called archaea. Archaea used to be classified as bacteria a long time ago, like 20 plus years ago. They've since been recharacterized, reclassified as their own group of living things, but on the surface and at a quick glance, they look like bacteria. They're not bacteria, but they look like bacteria. One of the primary differences between bacteria and archaea is the fact that bacteria, all bacterial species make this molecule called peptidoglycan, and archaea do not. The only things that make peptidoglycan are bacteria. Two basic kind of cells on the planet, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Pro-carry means before the nucleus. Eukaryotes, carry still refers to the nucleus. So what does eu mean? EU? Eu means true or good. So eukaryotes are organisms with true or good nuclei, true nuclei. So the groups of organisms that are eukaryotes is, if it's not a bacterium or an archaea, it's a eukaryote, end of story. So what does that mean? It means everything else. It means all animals, all plants, all fungi, and all protists, these things called protists. We'll talk about protists in a long time in biology too, actually. So, two basic kinds of living things. Those that don't have organelles, prokaryotes, and those that do, eukaryotes. They do have membranous organelles. Membranous means they're either wrapped in membrane or they're made of membrane. A membrane would be like that skin that goes around the outer surface of the cell, like a phospholipid bilayer. The nucleus has a wrapper around it. It has a holder. It has what's called the nuclear envelope. You put a letter in an envelope, you seal it in, right? The nuclear envelope, it seals the DNA inside the nucleus. That is a membrane-bound, a wrapped in membrane organelle. And then we have these other kinds of organelles called membranous, which means they're not wrapped in membrane, they're made of membrane. And we'll talk about the different kinds of organelles. But prokaryotes don't have organelles made of membrane. Eukaryotes do. These membranous organelles, organelle, what does the word mean? Well, what are your organs? You see the root word here is organ. What are your organs? Like your heart, like your liver, your stomach? Your heart, what is its job? It pumps blood. Right. Your liver, what is its job? To detoxify poisons. Right. Your stomach, what is its job? To digest my food. Can you live without a heart? No. Why? Because nothing else pumps blood. So the heart is the only organ that does that job. Can you live without a liver? No. Why not? The liver is the only thing that detoxifies poisons, and it has a whole bunch of other jobs we didn't even mention. Can you live without a stomach? Well, sort of. Not very well. The point, an organ has a specific job that it does inside your body that nothing else does, and you pretty much can't live without any of them. Organelle, L-E-L-E, is one of the 1,000 suffixes that means little. So organelle means little organs. Eukaryotes have organelles, have tiny little structures inside of them that do a job for the cell that nothing else does. The nucleus, it holds the DNA. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The chloroplast, it photosynthesizes. The rough ER, it makes proteins. The Golgi apparatus, it finishes proteins. Each of these organelles have different jobs that nothing else does. One last thing about eukaryotes is that animal cells do not have cell walls. All plant cells do, all fungal cells do. Not all, but lots of protist cells do have a cell wall. But animal cells, you're an animal. Your options are a mushroom, a tree, or an animal. Pick one. You're an animal. Animal cells don't have cell walls. Cell walls are rigid. Animal cells are not rigid. They're soft. They're squishy. Those are the differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. What do they have in common? Well, what they have in common is they're all wrapped in membrane. Even that bacterial cell that has that peptidoglycan cell wall that goes around it, it still has inside of that a cell membrane, which is still a phospholipid bilayer. Cells are made of two things, the cell membrane and everything inside. Everything inside is called the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is all the stuff inside of a cell. What is the cytoplasm made of? The cytoplasm is made of the goop and then the other stuff. Other stuff like the organelles. The goop is called cytosol. You may have learned that cytoplasm is the goop inside of a cell. It is not. The cytoplasm is everything inside of the cell. The cytoplasm is made of organelles, and the goop is called cytosol. Everything you know is a lie. The cytosol is the goop inside the cell. It's mostly water, but it has about 4% dissolved stuff. Life is mostly water. Inside of all cells, eukaryotic or prokaryotic, they'll all have a chromosome, at least one. Bacteria have one large chromosome, and they will sometimes, not always, they will sometimes have little miniature chromosomes called plasmids. Most eukaryotic cells will have 2+ chromosomes. How many chromosomes do you have? Well, humans have 46, arranged into 23 pairs. Most eukaryotes have many chromosomes. Pea plants, I think, have 14 chromosomes. You have 46. They have 14. Okay. Eukaryotes almost always have pairs of chromosomes. Prokaryotes never have pairs. They just have one large chromosome. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes, what else do they have in common? They both have one special organelle called a ribosome. And we said that, prokaryotes don't have organelles, except for this one. They do have this one. But the difference is, whereas the nucleus is wrapped up in that nuclear envelope in a wrapper, the mitochondria is wrapped in a wrapper, chloroplast is wrapped in a wrapper. The ribosome is not. The ribosome does not have a wrapper around it. It's kind of like the difference between, if you can imagine that the nucleus is like your house. It has a wrapper around it, right? It's got walls around it. Then the ribosome is like your living room chair. It has a function. It has a job that it does. But it doesn't have a wrapper. It doesn't have a wall around it. It does a job, and it's a lot smaller. And that's the other thing, is that ribosomes are really, really small. And they do have ribosomes. And the job of a ribosome, whether it's in a bacterium or in a eukaryote, the job of a ribosome is to follow the instructions that come from the DNA. And that's another thing that they all have in common. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes all have DNA in them. And the other part of that is that they follow the instructions the same way. The ribosome gets a copy of the instructions for a particular product, a protein. The ribosome follows the instructions the same way, whether it's a prokaryote or a eukaryote, they do it the same process. One of the fundamental qualities of life, all living things regardless, is that they all have DNA, the code is the same, and you follow the code the same way. That is the most common, that is the fundamental basement of all living things. DNA follow the same way. This shows a bacterial cell. Here we see the bacterial cell, this big blue thing in the center. I hope you've got the PowerPoints downloaded next to you, like maybe on a phone or something like that. The pictures are a lot clearer in person than they are over YouTube. So please, 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 whenever you are watching the videos, try to have a copy of the PowerPoints next to you so that you can follow along with me and look at better pictures. Inside of this bacterial cell is its chromosome. I know it looks like a big clump, but it's actually, and it is a big clump, but it does not have a wrapper around it. It's basically like if you took, just imagine you took a big rubber band and you roll it all up in your hand and you have a big wad of rubber band, right? Well, that's what the chromosome of a bacterium is like. We can also see the ribosomes in here, these little brown dots, those are the ribosomes. And that's pretty much it for the interior of a bacterial cell. They do have that cell wall. This red thing right here is the cell wall. The gray thing underneath of it, that's that cell membrane. Remember, we said it has a cell membrane. All cells have cell membranes. The gray thing is the cell membrane. The red thing is the cell wall. And then this yellow thing is another thing called a capsule or a slime layer on the outside of it.